Hey, it's me. And so we are going to be talking about, this is our last day of class. It is week 12, day 1, ship handling. Just get my camera ready here and kind of sit up straight. So we're going to review quickly review the main points from last week's lectures, and we're going to discuss other factors affecting UKC for vessels making way in shallow water. You know, boy, this has been quite the semester. I've had some bloopers on the way. I didn't drop the F-bomb, but I dropped the S-bomb in this morning's. Hi. I know. It's them. Yeah, it's those people who I see all the time. Yeah, so go ahead. Get this over with. All right, go. Leave. Go. How can I be talking to anybody but herself? Okay. Yeah, so I didn't drop the F-bomb. I dropped the S-bomb in the freshman class this morning. But that's just the beginning of it. Let's get going with the lecture. Let's see if I can do this with any kind of degree of a little bit of eloquence here. I remember I was talking about Dr. Brian Barras, who is this kind of the expert. So I just pulled something out of his textbook or his book that he has used. And so this, here, I just want to review. We're talking about squat. And here we have that. Here's a showing his take on the streamlines of water under the hull. It's being compressed. So we know that that's the Bernoulli principle in action. There's that bow wave, still water line. Okay, we get all that. The other thing that we talked about, let's look at this. Let's see, we got 3 figures here. This is a fine form vessel. This is a full form vessel, and this is a medium form. So we're talking about block coefficient here. And so remember that 0.8 for a block coefficient, either larger or smaller. Rather, it was 0.75, I think. So here we say, let's see, we got velocity, and he likes his terminology. Velocity, say about 10 knots. So that's the way he likes to do it. It's clearly exaggerated here. I get it, but the fine form, lower block coefficient is going to grounding at the stern due to excessive speed, and if we're in excess of, let's say, 10 knots, and so here's this full form, let's say greater than 0.75, maybe 0.8 for a block coefficient, grounding here at the bow. And if we're a medium form, we wouldn't probably get either of that. It would just have only sinkage but no dynamic trim. And again, this is from Dr. Barras. And then there was one more that we could just put myself out of the frame there for the same thing. And so this is a little bit more elaborate. And I want you to, so here we have the vessels doing 15 knots. It's going along. It's seabed topography. We've got a depth of water. There's no restriction. It's got a high block coefficient. And, all is good. We don't have any squat really occurring because we're not in shallow water. Then we come to a sandbank. But check this out, a sunken vessel or any kind of a raised shelf, on the seafloor. So what do we experience right here? So first of all, speed decreases by about 30%. Now, you didn't change anything. RPMs decreased by about 15%. We didn't change anything. The tanker trims by the bow. We didn't do anything to move cargo around. Rolling, pitching, and heaving may decrease. And squat possibly increases to the point of meters and possible grounding here. Then we come back to deeper water after you've gone over this, whatever it is, the shelf. But I kind of I like the way we think about not only a sandbank, but also just a sunken vessel. Ship returns to its 15 knots, revolutions come up to 100% or 100 RPMs, so on and so forth. So that's an interesting take on it as well. Well, okay, now stability and UKC. So this isn't a function of squat. However, the same process that waterway simulation technology used, these people here, the same process with those multiple DGPS arrays on the bow and the stern, on the center line, bow and stern, and the port and starboard rail or bridge wings, and probably duplication, a high level of DGPS to gather this data, not only of trim, but of list and of elevation, all the things that you can get out of a GPS, and especially a differential GPS. So this is what this is. It's a function of a vessel list and the associated dip to one side or the other as the vessel tips to either port or starboard during a turn. I'll let that one sink in. It's a function of the vessel's not trim, but of list. And I'm going to use the word dip to one side or the other. Vessels will lean over to one side or the other during a port or starboard turn. The amount of mean draft is significant, and the larger the beam of the vessel, the larger that mean draft increase will be. As an example, look down here. As an example, a 106-foot beam vessel, which is nowhere near that new Panamax size, may develop an increase of up to 11 inches for every degree of list. Gosh, man, that's you're already losing underkeel clearance for squat, dynamic trim and sinkage squat, but now as you turn, it becomes something else. Now I've got written down here that where does list come from? Well, let's see, turn-induced list when a vessel turns, and we'll go down the next slide, we'll look at that. Then there's rudder-induced list, which is part of that turn. The rudder initiates the turn. But then there's something called propeller-induced list. Now, number one and number two, they're kind of related. Two separate components of what's happening there. One, the rudder-induced, but they're together, but they're separate. But number three, a great example of this is our vessel on the waterfront, the Friendship. And I think some of you got aboard the Friendship. And when you clutch the Friendship in, when you clutched it in, that vessel actually listed to starboard. It's right-hand turning propeller. And as that propeller, because that's a dragger. That was a fishing boat. It was meant to do drags, small dragger, but it was a dragger. It's got a very, very large prop, very strong engine. It was meant to pull a net through the water across the bottom to do dragging. And by the nature of that propeller, when it turned, right? When it turned, it grabbed the water and the whole boat. I don't know if you've seen this or if you did, but give me a thumbs up or something as you're watching this, as I'm talking about it, that you saw that. Now, it's pretty insignificant on a small boat. There's 20, 30 feet at high tide of water under it, even when it's sitting there at the dock. It's pretty deep there in the harbor. But, just so you know what that is. Well, let's go on. I mean, do you have any, doesn't that picture say it all? We talk about what's going on here. And this is a DDG. I can't tell you the name of it. And it is clearly in a port turn. You can see the turns coming around. It was doing sea trials here, and it is definitely listing in a direction. It's listing to starboard, and it's in a port turn. That's different than something when you go into a non-displacement hull, something like this. And many of us have had this experience. You are on a planing hull, and it's completely different. You're listing into the turn or to starboard, right? So that's different. A displacement hull will lean outside, and a non-displacement, a planing hull, will, when it's up on plane, will tip into it. Right, so just realize that's what's happening. So let's look at this diagram. I made this little very, very simple animation up. That here's a vessel going along, and it's on even keel. Here's the water line. We've got very, very small under keel clearance. The vessel, as it starts to move, we're gonna have squat happening there, and then we go over here and we get to this point, and now the vessel is listing. Let's see, we are turning. Let's imagine that we're looking at the stern of the ship, and that this is a port turn, so we are listing to starboard, and look what happens down here. And as you get, so there's the problem. That's the short, simple version of why you would lose UKC when the vessel is listing. All right? Perfect. Let's keep going. Now, this is all out of the reading assignment. So ordinarily, let me read this off to you. Ordinarily, one would expect that the larger, full-bodied, high block coefficient ships would be more at risk of decreasing UKC from pure, just like we talked about previously, pure squat. We would think that the larger the block coefficient is, the more it would squat. However, and this happened down in the Panama Canal during that test, it's been tested, it's been shown, the research has been done, the data's there. It may actually be the finer line, the large beam ships, but with finer lines. In other words, less of a full body form. In other words, less of a block coefficient. Such as vessels like container ships, passenger ships, car carriers that suffer this dangerously reduced UKC. And this isn't from squat, mind you. We're talking about this turn-induced, this leaning. This isn't from squat, but rather it's from the port or starboard list factor. What's interesting here, and you got to get you to really focus on this, these fine line ships tend to carry a relatively less GM. Now, it's important that you've had the stability class, or at least some stability when you think about this. And that happened early in the process. You understand what GM is. So this middle paragraph, these fine line ships mentioned above, container, passenger, car carriers, have relatively purposely less GM than tank ships and bulk carriers. And those tank ships and bulk carriers are the high block coefficient ships. Follow along here. Less GM. All right, just taking a side here. Less GM, less is an indication of the tenderness of a ship's roll. Now, you know what stiff and tender ships are. I'm sure someone's talked about that. And suggests when you have a tenderness or you have less GM, i.e. tenderness, and that suggests that when internal forces are more easily able to induce rolling, if you're in a seaway, just the waves rolling you, that's normally what we think about as GM, is that, it rolls more gently. But it also is going to list more easily. On the other hand, furthermore, having a larger or greater GM defines a stiff ship. You'd agree with that. And that a stiff ship is an indication of the forces not being able to cause that vessel to roll, or during a turn to list. So we've got two ships here on the bottom, and we've got a car carrier over here, and you can imagine that this car carrier has what? It has a higher center of gravity. Because it has a higher center of gravity, it has less GM, right? But it's all about where the center of gravity is. And this tanker over here, it probably has a lower, because everything is down in the hole, down in the cargo tanks. Tankers are going to be generally stiffer, harder, bigger GM ships. They're going to roll, but they're going to roll. It's going to be more difficult for that vessel to roll. We'll do a very simple comparison here. Right? So look at these two. It's pretty obvious that they're the same hull. One of them is a tanker, and one of them is a container ship. All right. Now, we know where the center of buoyancy is. We know where the center of gravity is. Okay, so it doesn't take much. The center of gravity is probably just an estimate, is on the container ship, and the center of gravity a little bit lower. So the tanker is going to be a little bit stiffer. The container ship over here is going to be a little bit more tender. Which one of these steps is more stiff or tender? I don't want to go there yet. I want to continue. I'm going to go back to this last slide here. All right. Now we're going to go big screen. We're just going to chat for a minute. The question becomes, and part of this, the fullness of this answer is, why is it preferable for think about this, why is it preferable for a car carrier, a container ship, or a passenger ship to purposely be a little bit more tender? Why is it more, and this really is the question I'm going to ask you on the test. Why is it likely? Why is it desirable? Why is it planned for a car carrier or a container ship or a passenger ship to be a little bit more tender? Let's start with the passenger ship. I'm not making any light of this, but passengers don't like to be suffering shaken adult syndrome. They don't want to be paying all that money and to have that ship snap rolling back and forth. So they purposely keep the GM a little bit on the tender side, so it doesn't have that stiff roll. If you've ever been on a ship, and I'm not sure you in your experience, if you've ever seen or you've been on a ship which has only a little bit of GM and it has that long roll, I'm going to demonstrate this, a long roll, and so you start going over and you start going over and you say to yourself, when's this going to end? When's it going to come back? When's it going to end? When's it going to come back? And you start thinking to yourself like, oh man, this is just like really, really slows down. And then starts coming back. Go, good. This is good. Whoa. Don't keep going. Whoa. And it goes all the way over here, right? That's a tender ship. And that's too slow of a roll. It's too easy to induce that tipping. Get on that other ship's going bang, bang. That is that stiff ship. That's not comfortable either. Things are thrown off the bulkhead. Filing cabinets are torn off the chief mate's office. Saw that one. Cargo is thrown all over the place. Passengers don't like that. Well, what about container ships? Those containers up on the upper tier, the upper layers of containers. That's how container ship whipping back and forth. If it's such that it's being driven like that. That's how those containers rip loose and end up floating around, as stray containers in the ocean. There's just too much force up there. What about car carriers? Those upper decks of a car carrier, full of $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 vehicles. You don't want that ship snap rolling. So you want that container ship, you want that car carrier, in other words, same thing. You want that to have a little bit more of a gentle roll. In other words, you want the GM to be a little bit less. So you purposely ballast the ship accordingly. It's very complex. And there's more to just stability than just stability. Here's a great time where we take stability class with Tarrant and Slazes, and you get over here with Teal, and this just blends together. I'm going to share this video with them. It's all about that and it's all about this. And it's that turn-induced list. Okay, well, we're getting towards the end here, and another point that the author makes in that PDF that I have been discussing is acceleration in UKC. This one's pretty simple. The acceleration of a ship has been shown to cause significant increases in squat. And we saw that in those first two diagrams that we looked at last week, where we had the speed curve up on the top for those ships that we were looking at, and for both the container ship and the bulk carrier. And we saw that during periods of pretty, I'll call it aggressive acceleration, they did tend to squat more, both dynamically and dynamic trim, either by the bow or the stern, or just overall sinkage. The test by WST Inc. showed that squat could be expected to double. Did you get that? That's a pretty simple question. It's probably going to show up on the test. Could be expected to double during aggressive acceleration as compared to classic squat, just all by itself. Ship's officers are cautioned on this point to increase speed incrementally rather than just putting the pedal to the metal, running the throttle up, rather than moving directly to its sea speed condition. Let's just kind of take it up in notches, so to speak, notch it up a little bit. Okay. Ship interaction in squat. We really are getting to the end, and we're 22 minutes into this. Studies reveal that squat during times when two ships are in close proximity and they're passing each other, or they're in proximity when they are overtaking each other, that the effect is cumulative. A vessel with a 3-foot squat is meeting a vessel with a 4-foot squat, and when a beam or nearly a beam, both vessels will immediately increase to about a 7-foot squat. It's cumulative. It's the sum of both vessels. Sum. That sounds dangerous. Let's pause for just a minute. Headed to go get the boats. So what we're talking about is two ships coming at each other, right? And they're in a meeting situation, and as they meet, this ship is it's in a narrow channel. It's running close to the bottom, and this ship is in the same channel. It's running close to the bottom. Both ships have some amount of squat, and they're doing their thing. And as they come by, both are going to have it's not just this vessel which is going to go down, but this one's going to go down as well. So they're going to come down cumulatively. And that is what we're going to look at next. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. All right, cumulative, key word here. And let's look at this last diagram here. So we are thinking about these two boats. I'll put those aside now. Let's just talk about this diagram. Well, first of all, let's explain what we got here. We have two ships which are going to be passing by each other. And one of them is they're both container ships. One is the Ever Refine. That's the ship over here on the left. And the other one is the Ned Lloyd Dejima, and that's this over here. Now, what's interesting about this is that this is the only vessel, the data that was collected, this is the one that had the DGPS on it. It was going by this vessel. We know nothing about what happened to this vessel. We can suspect, but none of what you're seeing here is going to be related. In other words, you're seeing two lines up here, This is the bow of the Ever-Refine, and this is the stern of the Ever-Refine. This is the speed of the Ever-Refine. That's all that is. We have no data on this. This is kind of like the guinea pig out there that we were passing. All right. I'm going to put myself in here like this. No, put myself over here like this. All right, so the vessels are coming along. Now the Ever-Refine, by the way, is coming through here. It's moving in this direction as I'm going from the left of the screen to the right of the screen. I'm going from increasing channel stations. That's the way I'm going. So the container ship, this guy, is coming this direction across the screen. This one's coming this direction across the screen. And when they get by, we start having the combined effect. What we see here on the graph, so there's the bow, and there's the stern. Oh, and you can see that the squat was about 2 feet. And we can see that at the bow and at the stern, the squat was right around, we're going to average that right around 4 feet. Because it was a container ship, relatively fine lines, it was squatting at the stern. It had a greater draft, greater dynamic trim, just as we would expect. And that's what it says in the lower part of this explanation here. But how do you explain that the dip here is here and then the dip is here? Think about that for a minute. How do you explain that? Let me come back on screen. So here comes these two ships. And they're coming at each other. And we'll just talk about this ship over here, this guy here. Hello. And it's going that way. And as it gets to the bows, come up abreast of each other, right? This bow goes down. And then they go a little bit further, and then the stern goes down. And then the bow pops up. And then the stern pops up. This is the Ned Lloyd ship. This is the Ned Lloyd ship. This is the Ever-Refine. It's coming along, and when the bows get together, it drops down. When the bows get together, the Ever-Refine, the bow drops down. Go a little further, the stern drops down. We're not gathering data. That's not what that graph shows. It's only about this ship here. It comes across, the bow drops down. When it gets to the bow of the other oncoming vessel, we go a little further, the stern drops down. As we get by them, the bow pops up a little bit, and then the stern pops up. So that's what's happening. That's tough to explain. I'll tell you what, folks. That's I'd venture to guess that there's a lot of people out in the business that don't know what you know now. You hold on to that, and you've learned something. That didn't come easy, and that's a lot of information. But you know, you're professionals. Damn it, you went to Maine Maritime Academy. You're here. That's a big deal, and that's what you're expected to know. So, you know, that's it. I got no more. I'm going to come back and I'll talk to you real live on person. But if you're just watching this and somehow I'm not coming back into the Zoom class, it's been a great class. Enjoyed it, and we'll see you around. Be back next fall. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.